What's the creepiest or most unexplainable thing you've ever experienced? When I was about 8 or so, my family went up to a campsite near a lake. We went with several other families and they brought their kids too. One thing me and this one kid would do is search the shallow areas for crawdads. As I was searching, I began to venture a ways out until the water was up to my waist. The water wasn't too clear, but it also wasn't muddy, and I could see the pale area of the shallows and the darker area where the water dropped off, but I didn't know that at the time. I ended up stepping into the darker, deeper water and began to fall in. Before I could, a pale, slender arm grabbed my leg and pushed me back to the shallows. All I saw was the arm as it sunk back into the deeper water before I skittered back to the shore. I remember it as clear as day, but nothing has ever turned up from that lake, no bodies, no drownings, nothing. My parents still think I made it up. A long time ago in primary/elementary school, me and my friend came to the school compound on a Sunday to explore. We came in the wee hours in the morning, and coupled that it was a Sunday, there was nobody in. We were walking along a corridor on the first floor, when suddenly we heard this thunderous noise above us. You know the sound where you drag a chair or a table across a floor? It was exactly that, but it sounded like there's multiple classrooms full of tables and chairs just moving around. It was loud. Very loud. And it was extremely sudden. There's no reason why anybody would be in school, moving dozens of tables and chairs on their own on a Sunday 6 a.m. We stood rooted, stared at each other for a second, and bolted. After we got out of school, he asked me whether I heard a lady screaming in the corridor. I said no. He didn't hear the dragging sounds either. I was in bed at night, woken up by the sound of steps on my roof tiling. I think I was about 13 at the time. I see a shadow walk past my skylight, unsure of what it was. I look outside my side window and see a man dressed in all black looking out from the construction scaffolding. After a while he looks into my window and I try to hide. My brother also saw him. We never found out what happened to him, but the police were informed. When my daughter was very young, 3 to 4, we were on a family vacation in a state park lodge. Our room had exposed wood ceiling beams to match the decor, important later. It was supposed to be nap time for my daughter, but she was quietly playing by herself and just chatting away, and the wife and I were reading on the other bed. Out of the blue my daughter turns to me and asks for a piece of rope. I asked why she needed the rope and she nonchalantly replies, "It is for my friend, the purple girl on the ceiling." My wife asks what friend, and my daughter responds, "I've been talking with the little purple girl hanging from that wood up there," points to the ceiling beam. She asked me for another piece of rope. Needless to say that nap time was over and we quickly exited the room. When I was 5, me and my identical twin sister both caught scarlet fever. We are from America, but my dad's project had temporarily relocated us to India, and we were not used to the water and food there. We both fell into a coma towards the end of the fever. One day I woke up to my mom and aunt screaming and crying and holding my sister because she was unresponsive and not breathing. They were doing chest compressions, CPR, etc., but nothing was working. I was desperately trying to get their attention because I was young and didn't understand what was going on. I went back in my room to go back to sleep, but in the corner of the room where my sister's bed was, I saw her laying there, breathing fine. I went back out to the living room and realized I was looking at myself in my mom's arms as she tried to revive me. Eventually, I saw my eyes flicker open, and then everything went dark. I woke up a few weeks later in the hospital next to my sister and mom, who ended up catching it because of us. My mom told me I had almost died and they were trying to wake me up, but I was unresponsive, so the ambulance took all 3 of us into the ICU. To this day, I am still unsure how I witnessed my almost death. I was young and digital cameras were a new thing. I was obsessed with them and my mom would buy me a camera, we'd try it and see if we liked it, and if it was shitty we'd take it back. We purchased a cheap one, indoor pictures had a red and yellow hue. It had long exposure, so a lot of the times there were streaks and weird stuff. I took a picture of my room one day, and plugged it up to the computer to view the picture. There was a full-blown man, wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt with a hat. There were also light streaks in the picture, but he clearly looked different from the imperfections, like there was a man actually there in mid-walking motion. I called my mom right before commenting this to ask if she remembers that. She said she didn't really. I don't believe her because the camera immediately disappeared after this event and she never got me another. When I think about it now, I'm my late 20s, it still makes tears come to my eyes because the house I grew up in was so scary and weird. I've never felt like that in any other home. Something was off. When I was a kid, I was playing in our kitchen when I saw a huge dark figure walk past the kitchen and down the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I walked to our back patio and saw the rest of my family watching TV. The patio is on the opposite side of the house from the hallway. I walked to the hallway and started looking for who it could have been, but never found anyone. Still have no idea who or what it could have been, but it's always creeped me out thinking about it. Not technically seen, but heard. When I was about 15, I willingly stayed home alone to look after my pets while my family went on a cruise. One night I heard the distinct sound of the old kitchen window open, freaked out and hid in the cupboard. Was so afraid that I called the police. They showed up soon after. One stayed with me and the other went around outside to check the window. Window was closed, no footprints, no marks on the window or anything. To this day I'm puzzled by this and am still confident that I really did hear that window open. I got recalled into work and was driving at about 3 a.m. I was in a very rural area in western Washington. As I come around a curve, I see a woman in a nightgown on the side of the road looking up at a steep embankment. Just standing there staring away from the road. There are no homes nearby, not for miles. I call 911 and pull over about a minute up the road, not knowing what to think. Deputy showed up, couldn't locate anyone and was as dumbfounded as I was. You know that black cloud that enters a room in the garage? I saw that for real one time, following a person who entered the apartment I was in. I freaked out and almost started hyperventilating, but of course, I couldn't tell the people around me what I was seeing, as I knew no one else was seeing it. I just darted out of there and sat in the elevator for a while on my way out. Never had shared that before. I went to one of the oldest universities in Canada that was originally Roman Catholic. There are rumors of a nun who killed herself out of shame for falling in love with a priest there, and the building is said to be haunted to this day. There were also rumors going around that there were underground tunnels running below the building, but no one could confirm their existence. One night I was out smoking and chatting about all of this with some friends when a student I had never met before approached us and said that the tunnels were in fact real. He told us to follow him and we did. He stopped at his room to grab a butter knife and then took us through a random series of doors and stairwells until we reached a door at the end of a long hallway in the basement of the building. He picked the lock with the knife and to our great surprise, we were now entering the tunnels. We had to physically crawl between rooms and I had this awful sinking feeling the whole time that some weird shit had happened down here. We eventually got out of there and never spoke of it again. As teenagers, my friends and I were walking back through a graveyard one night. We were walking towards the top gate along a side path. As we neared the top, we noticed what appeared to be an elderly woman in rags walking really slow towards the top. Our first thought was not to distress her by walking out. But we all commented on her dress. Imagine 18th century style. She stopped on the path and turned running back towards THR bottom. Her movement was so weird, it was like a young woman. No homeless in the area and none of us were paranormal believers. To this day we still bring it up. The weirdest thing was her style and her movement. Me and my girlfriend were driving down a narrow country lane. No street lamps, the sun was setting but it wasn't completely dark yet. Out of nowhere this giant black mass appeared, like a mist. almost like when you drive through a patch of fog, but it was a black mass. It wasn't smoke or anything like that, and there was nobody else around, so it wasn't some sort of car smoke. It appeared for like half a second. We didn't drive through it, it just disappeared. We both saw the exact same thing and were completely silent for a while, trying to process what the hell it was. When my friend was little, he would usually leave the door closed when he slept, but on a hot summer night he opened it to allow for better airflow. He turned out the lights and got in his bed. His eyes were drawn toward the dark void that was his hallway. As his eyes adjusted, he saw the silhouette of a man in a suit with a top hat. He stared at it for hours and the man didn't move, just stared. He closed his eyes and just tried to sleep. The next morning he looked down the hall to find nothing. What was odd was he found nothing to make that silhouette. No boxes or objects or anything. The hall was completely empty. The man visited him often throughout his young life, but he just explained it to himself as dreaming or his imagination and never thought much of it. One day recently he talked to his sister and somehow mentioned the man in the top hat. He started laughing at the absurdity of it, but looked and saw she wasn't laughing. Her room was in the other side of the hall and she saw the man in the top hat often when she was a child. As a really young child, like 3 or 4, I would see and hear things in my house. I remember being at the dinner table with my mom and dad and baby brother, 1 year old, and hearing a baby crying coming from upstairs. It was loud and prolonged. I told my parents and they said they didn't hear anything except maybe a squeal or two from my baby brother. I also remember seeing a woman dressed in a black dress standing in our reading room. I pointed her out and even talked to my mom about it. She just thought I was being a kid. This is a true story. We were visiting relatives at Christmas time and decided to go and shop for presents one evening. Predictably, it was pitch black outside when we left the department store. We got into the car and after driving for a few minutes, my mother decided to take a shortcut through an alley. Out of force of habit, she glanced in the rear view mirror. But this time, she gasped in horror. A man had planted himself at the entrance to the alley. Then the headlights brought a man into view just meters in front of us. It was a trap. The men were thieves, or much worse. Here was my mother, alone in the car with 3 small children. So she floored it, stepping on the accelerator as hard as she could, giving the man blocking her just a second or two to get out of the way. She raced out of the alley and turned the steering wheel to the left, getting us out of there and out of danger. I was 10 at the time. When I was a teenager, I asked if she would have hit that man had he stood his ground instead of literally leaping to safety. Yes, she replied. This will probably get buried, but whatever. I work as a nurse in the hospital. The treatment room I work in has space for 2 beds. One night when I was cleaning up after our last procedure with some coworkers, the heart monitor on the left wall came to life and showed a heart rate and respiration rate despite being connected to no one. Most definitely yanked the plugs off that monitor from the wall. I've had plenty of spooky happenings at that hospital, but that one stands out to me.